Welcome back from the topical discussion, and of course, at this very particular time, we're heading into the SMB on ground, and the discussion around is going to be on the economic drivers, and it's based on the fact that the fuel prices are reducing on a daily basis, but the prices of the basic needs in Uganda is still rising up. Why is it the way it is? I know for you, you could be right there, and you're also wondering too. You're driving. You find that the fuel prices are reducing on a daily basis, but the cost of living is still rising high. And of course, in this particular discussion, it's going to be regarding an insight from one of the prominent economists, of course, discussing what are the drivers of these prices to be where they are currently, and of course, which are causing quite Ugandans to have quite a lot of questions on their mind regarding that aspect. And of course, don't forget, Zabu just made your trading experience much more brilliant, as you can purchase stocks on Altex. Just dial *292# and you'll be availed with quite a variety of options. And of course, you will be in position to own a share in a company. And the most amazing thing is that you can do this at whatever part of the country you are at, and you will be in position to earn a side income. Zabu, do something new for yourself. The markets open up exactly that's 8:15 a.m. and they close at 3:15 p.m. all East African time. Do something new for yourself and earn yourself a side income. All right. And away from that, now we're heading straight into the Smart Means Business on Ground segment, discussing the economic drivers. We return.
Yeah, well, the oil prices will remain uncertain a little bit. The main drivers being OPEC, 21 plus countries, which is basically the number of OPEC countries, and there are those they call plus. Now, some of the major players are outside the OPEC, but still OPEC carries the day. But now the other additional countries, which will include Russia, seem to be working jointly together with OPEC to try to raise the price of oil. And there are many reasons for it, really. Some of them, they are saying the oil companies lost a lot of money in the last 5 years because we had a slowdown of the global economy and they were not selling as much. We had a COVID lockdown. They lost a lot of money. And the oil industry, really, once the oils are running, some of them you have to spend a lot of money to keep the oil if it's not being consumed. So they incurred a lot of losses during the COVID period. Now some are saying that is their opportunity at this point to keep the prices high and recover or something. But also they are mindful of their humane kind of obligation. You don't want to make money out of a miserable situation for people. So most of the developed countries, if not all of them, are going into winter where they use a lot of gas and oil. Now, that means we might see a spike in the demand for oil and gas during winter as people have to keep warming up and heating up their premises. Now, whether they increase to match that increased demand is a question that will determine what we see the oil prices going to. But even as you say, the increased demand, there are also other views that following the increase in interest rates to curb inflation at the global level, we might see some economies going into a recession. That's negative growth, really. And now negative growth might mean people will demand less oil, which may now counteract the increased demand because of winter, reduced demand because of recession. So we really do not know where that goes. But also America has taken a position to use their reserves. So 2 weeks ago, the OPEC countries reduced the supply by 2 million barrels, but we've also now seen a situation whereby America has increased to try and counter that. Now, if they cut again, America may find it a problem to really keep catching up with them. So we might see oil prices stagnating or there between $90 to $100 a barrel for some time to come. So the decline we are watching is temporal. It may continue, it may stagnate where it is. It may reverse a little bit, but what we are hopeful of is we may not get back to 6,500 like in the case of Uganda, when the barrel had gone all the way to over $120 at a global level. So that's the uncertainty in the oil sector. We still have to watch their moving pieces, the war in Ukraine and how it responds. We have seen it take on a different dimension. The last 2 weeks, Russia has been bombing energy sites in Ukraine, meaning Ukraine itself now might need to import where it has been using its own. We've seen the Ukrainians responding to say we need to be frugal and minimize the use of energy. But remember, Ukraine was also trying to fill the gaps in Europe that were left by reducing the demands in Russia. So it's really an evolving situation. Maybe in another 2 weeks or so, we might have a better prediction of what the next 3 months may look like. The food prices are really driven by a number of factors. One is the transportation of food, which is logistics. That may be related to the oil prices. But it's a small component, really, depending on the season where we are. Food prices, by and large, the major determinant is the seasons of harvest and planting. Now, we've not had very good weather for the last maybe 2 or 3 years. That has affected us. Of course, you have heard of the famine in Somalia. Theirs is always in extreme. But that effect on Somalia for no good weather for the last 3-4 years or seasons has also affected other parts of the East African region, including us. So for 2 years, we haven't had some good supply, meaning our reserves and inventories that move us in between seasons have been compromised. And the people need to notice, as they say, watch out what you ask for, you might get it. Uganda traded itself as a food basket of the region. Uganda began to look at itself as not a landlocked country, but a land-linked country, because many people are referring to your markets at a global level. So they will say if you are not by the sea, you are not going to easily trade. But you don't have to be at the sea or having a shoreline, because that means I'm looking at other people in other continents are not my neighbors. Now, over the years, that has changed for Uganda, that the bulk of our trade is with Kenya, South Sudan, DRC, and Rwanda, basically within the region. And those countries have been buying a lot of foodstuff from Uganda itself. And Uganda now has to catch up with its own domestic food requirements and the food requirements of the region. And that is a play we have seen that triggered the increase in the food prices. So the food price increase in the last 3 months was partly the increase in the fuel prices for logistical reasons, but partly the shortage of the food itself in the country. Because with food streets, you get to villages, you hardly find sufficient amounts of food. Now, we have just planted. Really, the planting season in Uganda is August and September, and a lot of foods that supply us with things like potatoes, things like rice and maize, will take 90 to 120 days to mature. Meaning the next harvest season is going to begin next month for those who were able to plant early in August, and then to December. So the current food price increase is partly related to that seasonal cycle. That right now food is still in the garden, maturing, not yet reached the harvest level. So whether fuel prices come down, that shortfall alone will still see the food prices go up, at least for the month of November, and maybe the month of December. Now, but also we have schools opening. They are major institutions that consume a lot of food. And schools are trying to do everything possible to keep the children in the school, because this is an exam season. So they're trying to do everything they can to buy whatever food they have or they can find and stock to make sure come November all the children are able to stay in school and sit their exams. But that is also in the region, as we've said. It hasn't stopped South Sudan, Rwanda, DRC coming in to buy, and Kenya as well. So it is more on the demand side and the rigid supply. Now that's what economists will call the lags. As we've said, even if fuel prices come down immediately, It's not going to be true that the food prices will follow because they are being driven by other things. But also there are other lags that the trucks that bring in the food still have a problem of a little bit of depreciation of the dollar, because that is also driving spare parts. And let's not forget, Uganda still imports a lot of food. So the global inflation is still with us in terms of affecting food. The wheat prices, the rice, the cooking oil, those will continue to drive our food stocks higher. I've seen matoke go up. It's because some of the people are trying now to substitute imported foods with the local foods, which they were not taking at that time. But also the matoke has the effect of the seasonal stress. So we will see the food prices remain a little bit elevated, with pressures to go up until the end of the year. Yes, still a big disruptor. People should not forget that the impacts of COVID are still with us. I was seeing people saying the economy was opened, how come businesses are not doing well? We mentioned this really even before the economy opened. We said, what is going to happen? You don't open an economy. You open for the economy, for an activity to happen, because you didn't lock up the economy. You just locked up gates that allow the economy to interact. Now, when you open up these gates, it doesn't mean everything pops up back as usual. People who own arcades in town and small shops in town have come to the reality of this, because they thought by being allowed to go back and open arcades, business will resume. They forget business is that household, woman or man or boy who comes to buy things from that shop. That person has not recovered yet their business, and they have become frugal. Some of them completely abandoned urban areas and went back to the village. So there are certain clients that are not going to be there. People who are selling clothes, people decided, well, the 3 shirts I have will take me for the next 1 year. But that person was your client. They would come regularly and buy a shirt or 2 or a trouser. So there was a misconception that as soon as the lockdowns are over, the economy would bounce back. But the economy is an integrated piece. It will depend on those people who lost their jobs, finding those jobs again. And when they find the jobs, getting the salaries they were getting, so that they can come back into the demand side to consume things. But also remember, people still have arrears. Landlords let people sleep in their houses without paying. So even when the economy opened, the priority went to pay back the arrears to the landlord rather than coming back to the market to buy new clothes and eat food. So the gradual process of economic recovery can't happen within 1 year. So the COVID effect is still with us. While we were yet to recover from it, then the global onslaught of inflation came through. Now, while we are still balancing out those, the measures the central bank is taking to curb inflation by raising interest rates have also triggered in. So it's still like, as they say, when it rains, it pours. Really still pouring on us. The effect of government policy is yet even to materialize. Because remember, government, the action of curtailing credit is going to disrupt businesses, employment, and all sorts of activities in the economic activity in the private sector. Government itself is constrained because it survives partly on borrowing, but partly on revenues. Which revenues now, as you slow down economic activity to deal with inflation, the revenues will slow down. Now, there are quite a number of people who survive by offering services to government. Now, many of them are continuing to offer but on credit. So the government is piling up arrears. Now, many people are going to be conscious that this government really sometimes doesn't pay. Or if I take a bank loan to supply government and government delays. So the ripple effect of the previous government behavior is beginning to affect private sector who will not be willing to deliver services to government. So we are going to continuously see an economic slowdown. Now that might worsen or prolong the inflation on the supply side, because the central bank is trying to believe there is so much money in the market, let me get it out. I have a different opinion that while Europe is true, Europeans have a lot of money which central bank should mop out, because they remember they received a lot of money during lockdowns. For them, they continue to pay their employees as governments and companies were encouraged to pay. And yet people are not spending. So by the end of the lockdowns, Europeans had a lot of money to spend. Now, when you come to Uganda, Nabanja money was run out once, and people finished it. So initially do not have sufficient resources. Even the businesses we are discouraging from going from the banks to borrow, some of them are really in a catch-22 position. I'm running a school, as I've said. Parents haven't paid the money. I cannot chase these children at the time they are sitting exams. Food prices have gone up. So this school, the only option is, even when you raise the interest rate, they have to go and borrow. You are really between the rock and the hard place, and borrowing is your only way out. So you cannot say because interest rates have gone up, I will not borrow. The situation you are in demands you get money, not in January but in November. So whether rates are going up, there are those who are going to borrow. And that's why we're saying, how can we create windows for those who must borrow to complete ongoing processes or to sustain ongoing processes from those who can actually defer? Now, if the approach of increasing rates on everybody is what we are really questioning, to say there are entities that you need to preserve, and that power should be left to the banks to sort out. But if you say all banks have raised central bank rate, you must all raise your rates, then they are going to apply it across the board. And that will be harmful to certain sensitive entities. But you can use other measures, which is also the central bank is using, what we call cash reserve ratio. That of the money the banks have got, there is money they are confined to say, don't lend this. Now that means banks might be blocking out about 1 trillion or even up to 4 trillion because of that directive. Now that allows them to say, I need to be very frugal on who I lend to the remaining little money. Now that alone will check the outflow of loans. But this time you have not asked them to do it en masse. You have given them the degree of freedom to select who they do restrict and who they allow, depending on the knowledge they have of their clients.
There was an insight regarding why the fuel prices, despite that they are reducing, we still have high prices of the food, and of course quite so many has been shared regarding that insight, so you can tell why everything is the way it is. Okay, we've come to the end of the show, and of course I thank you from where we started from for staying with us all the way from the news recap till this particular segment of the SMB on ground. And I also take this time to appreciate the entire team we work together with to ensure that this content is delivered to you at your sitting room as you're watching in your comfort. And of course, don't forget, channel 394, that's Go TV, and channel 372 DSTV, at Smart24 TV, that's on Twitter, Smart24 TV Facebook, and Smart24 TV Live on YouTube, as you'll be in position to catch us at whatever part of the globe you will be at. Till tomorrow, good morning.